Okay, looks like we're in. So there we go. Okay, so we'll get started at 7 o'clock for anyone who's in here. I think we're also live on YouTube, maybe. Let's see. Not sure. Um, and yeah, that should be fine. My media. Sponsored media. This one. Good. So I'm going to get started right at 7. If you are here to ask some questions, you can upload them now, get them in the queue, and we'll get this going. Good. A little. Okay, I'm going live. I'll see you in a bit. All right. Good. Okay. So it's 7 o'clock. Let's get started. Who watched the eclipse today? Carlene's got a question in here.
Hi, Sarah. Just wanted to let you know that I made 8 loaves of sourdough bread and took it to a rent-a-table, which is people that do hobbies and stuff. And I sold all 8 of my loaves in within a half hour, and then had a lady call me about having another, if I could bake another one for her.
Oh, wow.
So how would you go about baking quantity and still keeping it fresh?
That's a great question. That's a really good question. So, congratulations. That must have been so nerve-wracking at first, going and knowing you were going to have your table and not knowing if it was going to sell. And then it must have just been such a joy to have them all sell within a few minutes. So, you can definitely mix big batches all together in one. So, you could take your recipe that you're using, and if it's a 2 loaf recipe, you can multiply it by 4. I've seen people use like big tubs that they get from, Walmart or whatever. Like they're like, I would say they're about 36 inches long and 6 inches deep, and then you can just mix your bread up in that tub. Now you're gonna have to learn how to coil fold if you're gonna do big batches. So we teach stretching and folding. Stretching and folding usually works best also for lower hydration loaves. But when you're making your small 2 loaf batch or 1 loaf batch, stretching and folding is more than enough. But with a big batch, an 8 loaf batch, then you're going to have some issues with getting that enough of a stretch and fold. So another way to do it is, instead of coming under this way and lifting up and bringing it towards yourself, you can get underneath your dough and lift it up like as if it were like a towel on the floor. Lift it up and put it back down on top of itself, and bring it under itself and lift it up and bring it back down on top of itself. Now, I wonder what you're going to do about the baking. If you want to have lots, Carlene, there's something called power baking. So if you've got freezer space, you can bake your loaves to about 95% through the week and freeze them. And then the night before your table, or the morning of, or whatever it is, you can just stick those loaves in the oven and finish baking them so that they're still fresh for the week. I've seen a lot of bakers do that. That's a really good way to manage your bread so that it's all fresh. So I would say it's going to really depend on what you've got around. Like if you've got a great big huge bowl that you can do these big coil fold style stretches and folds in, then that would work really great. But if you have lots of room in your freezer, then setting up these loaves through the week early and just using your regular 2 loaf recipe. And of course, every time you change something, right, if you start going to a really huge recipe, then there's always obviously like that learning curve of getting used to it. So you might want to put some practice in. But depending on what you've got, depending on if you're in a situation where you basically have to bake all the bread sort of the day before the rent-a-table and the morning of kind of thing, then you could do a big batch in a big bowl. And it's still the same thing as anything else, right? Get a clear, straight-sided container. Once you're done all of your coil folds, right? You can just leave it in that container and let it rise. Let's see what's coming up here. Got that one already? Yep, we got that one.
I have a question. I just ordered some starter that's pre-made from King Arthur Flour Company that they are going to be sending me. And I don't, as you know, like the sourdough taste. So as soon as I get the starter, I'll follow the directions as it says on the container. But at that point, do I pull some away and start weighing it and adding water and flour to continue it on so I get a bland tasting starter?
Yeah, so Hildy, just follow their directions until it activates. So with these dehydrated starters, they usually take 3 or 4 days to wake up. Like when I send out Mama, my dehydrated one, it's a 3 to 4 day activation period for their starter to wake back up. So just follow the directions exactly that they give you until it activates, and then you can switch your ratio. So by the time it's all said and done, I think you want a really not sour flavor. So you're probably going to do well on a 1-3 or a 1-5. I know we've talked about this, Hildy. I'm not sure which one you decided to go with, but basically once that starter is activated, you can change the feeding ratio however you like. So, and when a starter first wakes up, it sometimes is a little bit acidic. So a nice heavy flour feed will get it to sort of even out anyway. But yeah, don't change anything until it activates. Once it activates, it's doubling consistently after every feed. Then just discard it back to, say, 25 or 50 grams, and then feed it. Like if you were going to do a 1-3, for example, you would discard back to 25 grams and then feed it 75 grams of flour and 75 grams of water, right? 3 times as much flour and water as there is starter. So it's easy to do that. I wouldn't worry too much about that. I wouldn't worry too much about doing it that way. So there we go. All right. Well, we'll see if we get some questions in tonight. We had some really good ones last time. Let's see if anyone's, oh, here we go. Oh, somebody commented on YouTube, super excited for this show. If you're watching right now on YouTube, and you're seeing how these questions come in, I encourage you to come on over and jump on the app. It's free, and you can actually upload questions like this on video right to the chat and keep asking your questions and everything else, and then I can answer them for you. So I had some awesome loaves today. I think they might be like the prettiest ones I've ever made. And that's a happy day with sourdough. I had like a 3-week period where all of my dough was coming out really dense and gummy. And I think it was because of the seasons changing here in Ontario. We have very, very cold winters and then hot, humid summers. And so we're at that point now where it's like one day it's really warm and then the next day it's snowing again. And so I don't know if it was that was what was throwing it off, but like this is just sitting here buttered from dinner. But like, look at this amazing crumb. It was so beautiful. It came out of the oven. I was so happy. Just absolutely perfect. I love when that happens. Like it's just got this nice like crispiness on it. And then if you've ever watched my Facebook live tutorials or the tutorials that I have on YouTube, then you'll know that I do so much work to make sure that the bottom of my bread stays soft. And it seems to be getting more and more perfect all the time. So I've got this tray of water that I put in the oven underneath the rack that the Dutch oven is on. And then inside the Dutch oven, I put a little bit of crinkled up, I just crinkle tinfoil into a ball and then stretch it back out flat again and put that in the bottom of the Dutch oven. And then the bread, I just put the parchment right on top of the tinfoil. And you do all of this experimenting with sourdough and you sometimes you have good loaves and you can go a long time having some really good loaves and everything's going great. And then you can have this little patch where it's like, did I mess up my starter? Is my starter a little bit weak or is it the temperature change? What's happening? I'm not getting perfect bread all the time. And, for, like I said, 3 weeks there, all my loaves were coming out pretty heavy. I even had one that was like, it looked like from back in my beginner days, it was so heavy and dense. It was like a brick. And, we ended up cutting it up and putting it into a French toast bake. My husband makes the most amazing French toast bake. He takes our old sourdough. So when I get a new loaf of bread come out of the oven, I always have the ends of the last loaf of bread that we didn't quite get through yet. So we cut those up into cubes, about 1-inch cubes. And my husband butters a glass casserole dish and sprinkles cinnamon all over it. So it's like totally coated, like a lot of cinnamon. And then he piles all the bread in there and he mixes something like it's just a 9x9 casserole dish. It's not that big, right? But he uses like 10 or 11 eggs and beats those all up and some 10%, like half and half cream and pours it over top of the bread and lets it sit overnight. And then in the morning, last time he did it, he put canned peaches in, and because we can't get fresh peaches up here yet. Oh man, it was so good. The other time before that, we did it with strawberries, and they were absolutely wonderful. So what we do is in the morning, he's got his mixture's been now sitting all night, so the bread sucked up a lot of the egg, but not all of it. We bake it in the oven at 350. It takes like over an hour to get it to cook all the way through. So we start off with some tinfoil on top for probably the first half an hour, and then after that, we take the tinfoil off. And he actually uses a meat thermometer to check in the center to make sure it gets up to about 155 degrees. But it comes out like a cake, like a French toast cake. It's got like layers of egg that's almost cooked like quiche, and then the bread is kind of intertwined inside of it and the fruit and everything. It's so good. We pile some butter on it and some maple syrup, and then we put some whipped cream on, and everyone just gobbles it up. It's so good. So that's one of our sourdough adventures this week. I had excellent bread today. Super happy about that. I mean, I just can't stop looking at it. It's sitting here on the table. Look at this perfect, beautiful crumb. The ear came perfectly. I'm just so happy with it. So that was done with my level 2 hydration recipe. Oh, you need help with this? Sorry. This should be it, Rick. Sorry, guys. Make sure you upload your questions if you've got any. Hildy came and asked some, and Carlene came. There you go. All set. And if you're on YouTube and you can see us, then come on in here. I can see your comments too coming in. So the StarCam app is really awesome. It makes it so that I am live on YouTube, but I'm actually in the StarCam app, and I can see both the comments that people are posting on YouTube as well as the questions that are coming in on StarCam. So the level 2 hydration is 200 grams of starter, 700 grams of water, 1,000 grams of flour, any blend that you like, and 20 grams of salt. And we've got this guy in our big sourdough group. His name's Bill, and he lives up in Sudbury, and he makes the most beautiful loaves. His scoring is it's just fantastic. It's so lovely. I believe he has like a small bakery, right? Because he's always talking about, well, when I bake at home or when I bake at the shop. So I don't really know what the whole story is there, but whenever he posts, his posts get, tens of thousands of views, and people like the heck out of them. He draws owls, and he does these really intricate scores, and his bread always looks quite lovely. We don't see a crumb shot that often because a lot of times he's selling the bread, but wow, they just look sprung. The ear's perfect. They're perfect. They're so beautiful. So I read this post that he had written the other day, and he said, my hydration is not that high. It's only 69.8%. And, our level 2 hydration recipe is 70%, right? 700 grams of water to 1,000 grams of flour. And he said, essentially when I'm reading through, and he uses the same process that I use, but there's a couple things that are a little bit different. So I tried it Bill's way today. Lisa's doing a thing and a question. I'll get that in 1 second. Tried it Bill's way, and 2 loaves, like 2 bakes in a row, and they've come out really perfect. And one of the main things is he tries to trap as much moisture as happens as he goes. So he gets his dough into the bulk proofing containers as soon as it's mixed. Like he gets the dough mixed up and then gets it in those bulk proofing containers, stretches and folds right in the bulk proofing containers, and keeps the lid on tight in between each. And he says, never use a towel because the towel is going to suck the moisture out of your bread. And I don't know if he's right or wrong or anything. I'm definitely testing it, but my loaves have been perfect. So Lisa says, I'm struggling deciding if my dough is doubled in bulk fermentation. So I have pictures of my containers. Can I attach photos to show you? I don't think you can, but you can make a video. Unless you don't actually have it ready right now. You could make a video like where you can screen record, I think, or something. Anyways, I would love to see it. I would love to see it so much. Let's see. Hang on a second here. Lisa, I'm curious to know if you could text or upload a video question. How are you bulk proofing? Are you leaving the dough in a bowl, or are you putting it in the clear, straight-sided containers? Are you using that bulk proofing success method? And then, I'd love to see if we can.
So today we did a little experiment where we heated up our Dutch ovens. We set a timer for 45 minutes, and we put our Dutch ovens in the oven. At 45 minutes, I used a heat gun to shoot the side of the Dutch oven, just the outside, and it was 229. so we put them back in. 15 minutes later, it had gone up another 10 degrees. So I'm not sure how much that affects our outcome, really, but we did do that today with those great loaves. So maybe getting a hotter Dutch oven does something better for us.
Yeah, there's been lots of times where I've baked and I felt like I rushed the preheating stage with the sourdough, and then the sourdough doesn't quite rise as much as I want it to. And so we've been testing it. We've been really letting the Dutch oven heat up for a long time. My friend let me borrow this. It's his. It's a heat gun, like that contractors use. The only thing is it only goes in Celsius. I don't know. I cannot for the life of me figure out how to change it to Fahrenheit. So when Rick said he shot the Dutch oven, what it does is it just points like a little laser, and whatever the laser touches, it measures that temperature. So this ends up telling us a temperature in Celsius, and then we enter it into the internet, and we're like, oh, okay, 209 Celsius equals X Fahrenheit. So that's why he was saying that. But I am finding that the very hot Dutch oven seems to be helping me to
So,
get that good bread going.
also the weight of our loaf was 800 grams, and we baked 1,000. So, in regards to Bill's comments of trapping as much moisture in there as possible, I wonder if that would affect our end outcome or not.
Yeah, so Bill's thing is this is with Bill's process, right? I just want to make sure I'm not missing any questions. So Lisa, if you can, let's see if we can figure out a way to see your dough. I'd love to help with it. But Bill's comments were essentially that he's using a reasonably, like, not a super high hydration, 69.8%. So I've actually been, if I ever spill, like while I'm mixing, I'll go towards the higher side. So say, for example, if I end up with 210 grams of starter in there, I just go, whatever, it's fine. If I end up with 705 grams of water, I go, man, that's fine, it's fine. You know what I mean? I know how the bread works now, right? But the last two mixes, I actually went less on the starter. I went down to like 197, like not a huge amount, but I aired to the less side rather than the more side. And same thing with the water. I made sure the water didn't go over 700 grams of water. And then, like I said, Bill said that he mixes his dough right in the bulk proofing container, stretches and folds in there, and keeps that lid tightly sealed. And I thought it was very interesting that he specifically said, do not ever put a towel on top of your bowl. Everybody's been doing that forever, right? I do it all the time. I do it with everything, not just with sourdough. If I make a salad before supper, I'll throw the towel over the bowl just to try and keep the lettuce fresh for the 20 minutes until supper's on the table. So I did change that up. I have been putting the lid on between every single stretch and fold, and then letting the dough bulk proof in there. I extended my bulk proofing time slightly. I had been going towards 4 hours, 4.5 hours of bulk proofing, and I was getting those dense loaves. So I increased it 2 loaves ago. I got it up to 5.5 hours. Those loaves came out beautifully. And then yesterday I just got busy, and it ended up being closer to 6 hours. Before the bread got shaped and put into the fridge. And both times I cold proof them. Bill says he always does it at 8 hours minimum, no matter what. I don't usually cold proof. I don't usually have time. It's optional, but I was just doing this experimentation where I was trying exactly Bill's way. And like I said, the loaves have just been absolutely perfect. Maybe I'll go grab one and show you guys one while we wait for some questions to come in. I just want to check YouTube. So somebody on YouTube said, I've made sourdough bread twice. It comes out so good, but there's no sourdough flavor to it. What can I do? Okay, so you're the opposite of Hildy. So Hildy and I have talked lots about how she does not like the sour taste and wants it to go once it gone, right? So there's a couple of ways to increase the sour flavor. If you're feeding your starter anything more than a 1:1:1 ratio, you'll want to get that down to that 1:1:1, because that starter will ferment the fastest, right? So if you're doing 1:2:2 or 1:5:5, then change that down to a 1:1:1 ratio. And secondly, you can use your starter way past peak. The longer past peak that you use your starter, the more it's fermented, the more sour flavor you get, right? So we always teach that you feed your starter and you wait for it to double. And once it's doubled or peaked, you can then use it to in your bread, right? But you don't have to use it right away after. So I, for example, feed my starter before bed and then mix in the morning. If you really want a really sour flavor, feed your starter at supper time, tonight, and then leave it all the way overnight until morning tomorrow. It may have already started to fall, but that's okay. It will still work at that point, right? Your starter will still rise your bread, even if it's past peak started to fall. And then, of course, the last way to increase sour flavor is to cold proof your bread. Cold proofing just allows that dough to keep on fermenting the starter that you've put in it. The water and flour are coming together and fusing, and so that's going to increase that sour flavor in your bread. The only thing is, we say that beginners might want to consider skipping cold proofing just at first, because if they'd already made a mistake early in the process, especially during bulk proofing, then there's a good chance that that they messed something, or that cold proofing will make it worse. So let's see. So Lisa says, I use your method in clear plastic containers. I marked the sides and made my dough on Saturday and took pictures of my containers, hoping I would be able to submit photos. I think that's coming, Lisa. I just don't know how right now. But with those clear, straight-sided containers, right? Your dough's it's still always going to be an estimation. So Lisa, I've got a couple pieces of advice for you, right? Pick like a benchmark. So wherever you stopped it last time, like maybe mark the container of what it looks like when you stopped it. And if you bake that bread and it comes out under fermented, then you know you need to go longer. If you bake that bread and it falls and it's overproof, then you need to bulk proof shorter. But the other thing I say about those bulk proofing containers is that no matter what you do, that dough is not going to go into the bowl flat, right? It just doesn't. It's too elastic because you've just finished all the stretching and folding and strength on it. So you're going to put it in the bowl, and what it'll do is it'll spread sideways first until it hits the edges of your bowl, your bulk proofing container, and then it'll start to rise up. So you need to sort of go, okay, well, in the center, right, that's where it was the highest, right? It's not going to double from there, right? But on the corners where the dough wasn't really touching at all, it might actually like quadruple, right? So you kind of just want to use your eye to go, I think that overall, taking into account where the dough was high in the container and where it was low and where it wasn't touching the edges, that this might be double. And then try to remember where that was, or do something to help yourself remember where that was, maybe mark it, whatever it may be. And then if you're finding that your loaf is too dense or not holding its shape, not getting oven spring, then you can adjust that up and down. And then I guess the last thing is that you'll always be able to sort of have an idea of what your dough needs to do. You'll always, like for me, I'm like, my dough always takes about 5 hours. But as time goes on, as seasons change, sometimes that's 6, sometimes that's 4. They're never always all the same. So let's see. Ooh, I've got to get these down. Here we go.
I don't know what the longest proofing time in history is, but I'm sure someone in our group is going to figure it out with the pandemic of people posting these massively overproof doughs that there's no way they're going to turn out good. But everybody watches these posts and asks for recipes and things, and nobody sees the crumb at all. So who knows what's going to happen? Probably.
Yeah.
God, 60-hour
Rick and I
proofing.
We laugh about this all the time. People love the photos of dough that's bursting out of its bowl, but it's over fermented. It's not going to bake properly. I don't know how to do it. So Lisa says, it bulk fermented almost 4 hours. I put it in the fridge overnight and bake in the morning. My dough doesn't stay formed. Okay, so 4 hours and then followed by a cold proof shouldn't be too bad. Like if anything, it's short for time, right? Like we always say 4 to 8 hours. So it's on sort of the shorter of the end of what we would expect. And don't get me wrong, there are some people whose houses are really hot and their dough rises in 2.5 or 3 hours. So it's not impossible. So you're bulk fermenting, and then after the bulk fermenting, you're pre-shaping, shaping, getting it into a banneton, taking it out to bake it, and then when you're dumping it out of your banneton, it's falling. You're either doing it that way, or you're letting it bulk ferment on the counter for 4 hours and then just taking the whole container and putting it in the fridge overnight and then shaping the dough in the morning, which is fine too. I'm not sure why your dough would fall in that circumstance, but what I would suggest is skipping the cold proofing for a couple of bakes just until you feel like your dough is coming out right after the bulk fermentation phase. So let it go 4 hours, pre-shape it, shape it, and bake it right away. If it doesn't fall then, then you'll know that that sort of cold proofing is causing some issues. So what we do say is that if you are going to cold proof, let your dough rise to 75%. If you're going to bake the same day, let it rise to 100%. So if you're bulk proofing for 4 hours and cold proofing overnight and it's falling, maybe you have to shorten your bulk proof down to 3 hours. I'm not sure. We'll have to see. Good. Okay, so let's pop in here. Good. Tar P. Good. Okay. Bring that in. Yeah, so we see people all the time post these pictures. Like there's even one, there's a channel on YouTube, and every single one of the cover photos is this like big overproofed, like the, not overproofed, but this bowl with this dough like exploding out of it. And sourdough just doesn't do that, right? It's not how sourdough rises. Yeast bread rises like that, right? So with yeast bread, I'll always put my yeast bread in a little bowl so that as it rises, it puffs at the top because it looks kind of neat. But we see these posts all the time, and I always think to myself, like, I wonder if that loaf is actually going to bake up properly. So what did we cover so far today? Okay, so what are the essential processes? So the essential processes are the things that we think you need to do to get good sourdough bread. No more, no less, right? So it is to have an active starter, feed it 4 to 12 hours before you mix up your dough. Take your starter, dissolve it in your water, get them mixed together really well, add your flour and your salt, stir them up, get them mixed well until you get to a shaggy dough. Let it rest for 30 minutes and then stretch and fold. Repeat the 30 minutes and stretch and fold 4 times total. We think that'll build enough strength. So if you don't even understand what stretching and folding is doing yet, it's okay. 4 times is usually enough. Get your dough into bulk proofing containers and let your dough double in size. And then pre-shape your bread. Let it rest for about 30 minutes, shape it, get it straight into the oven, and bake it right away. We do suggest that the oven is preheated for a really long time, and I bake at 450, but there's lots of different baking ways. We can talk about all the baking vessels and everything in just a minute here.
Okay, so apparently a poke test with your dough, if you press your finger gently into your dough, and then it comes back slowly, leaving a slight indentation, that's apparently 75 to 80%. So they say.
Yeah. So I don't often promote the poke test, Lisa, but if you're really struggling with how it is, and by the way, Lisa, you can come on Facebook. You can message me in Messenger on the @Sourdough for Beginners Facebook page. Just send me the pictures there. I'll take a look at them for you. And I can definitely help you get that sorted out and figure out what the issue needs to be. So yeah, send me a message on @Sourdough for Beginners Messenger, or come make a post on like in the comments of one of the posts on the page, or even like in this event invite on Facebook, just post it. You can go into the discussion board on the event where you would have found the link to this live, and post your pictures, and then I can look at them there. I'm sorry we couldn't figure out how to get them up now, but the poke test, I don't often endorse it, but it is true. If you stick your finger in your dough and the dough comes back slowly, right, then it's pretty close to being good to go for baking, right? If it springs back fast, it's underproofed. If it doesn't spring back at all, it's overproofed. That's what the poke test says, but it's kind of wishy-washy.
Okay, so apparently a poke test with your dough, if you press your finger gently into your dough, and then it comes back slowly, leaving a slight indentation, that's apparently 75 to 80%. So
Right. That makes sense. So Lisa says, my dough is super sticky and doesn't hold a shape at all. So I wouldn't be able to bake the same day. Okay, so Lisa, for sure, 100% something is happening before bulk proofing then. So Lisa, I'd love to know which recipe you're using. We probably would, the first thing I would do for you is I would reduce your hydration. When dough is very sticky, it usually means that it's high hydration, right? Well, when it's really sticky before it proofs. So your dough should be sticky always, but it should also be manageable. So pre-shaping is really important. So Lisa, you definitely email me. I need to get you, I need to know what your recipe is. I need to make sure that we're building enough strength with the stretching and folding. And we need to make sure that the dough is bulk proofing nicely. And then pre-shaping will help you manage the stickiness. But if it's like a blob that just won't, like if it's super watery, it sounds like something's maybe just a little off in your recipe. That's really good to know. Good information. So Hildy says, what if you want to make cranberry and walnut artisan bread? When do you add artisan bread? When do you add those ingredients? So anything, I always add my inclusions after pre-shaping, like during the final shaping stage, because I find that they affect the hydration of my dough, right? If it's a dry ingredient like walnuts or cinnamon or sugar or whatever it is, those might reduce my overall hydration of the bread, right? Unless I reduce the flour accordingly to accommodate them. And then things like cranberries can increase the hydration of my bread when they let their juices out into the bread. So I like to keep the recipe exactly the way it should be right up till the end, and then I final shape the dough. And the way I do it is I stretch the dough out a little more than I usually would, spread all of my ingredients on top of the dough, do my first pamphlet fold, put more ingredients there, do my next pamphlet fold, put more ingredients on top of it, right? Roll it up, and then pile more ingredients on top of the loaf altogether. So I find that doing it where you just keep adding the inclusions during final shaping to all the steps of the final shaping, it gets nice and well distributed through the bread.
I just had the craziest thought. Do you think that that's the reason that they poke the Pillsbury Doughboy in the commercials, like the hee hee? That's probably what it is. It's poke test.
Oh boy. I think you're probably right. I never thought of that. I don't know how long it's been since I've seen the Pillsbury Doughboy. We don't even really watch commercials anymore, do we? I'm just going to check the YouTube comments here. Okay, so to increase the flavor of your sourdough, you can try the following techniques: longer fermentation, extend the bulk fermentation, and or final proofing time to allow the flavors to develop more fully. So, and that's on both sides. You can let your starter ferment longer, and your starter can increase the sour flavor in your bread, and you can increase the ferment time of your dough itself, and that cold ferment will increase that flavor. So good. Okay, so Lisa's dough is not shapeable after bulk proofing. And that means, and if she's only bulk proofing for 4 hours, it can't be that it's bulk proofing for too long. So the only option is that the starter is not active enough. So if it's a very new starter, that's not doubling consistently after every feed, but that's rare. People know when their starter's ready, right? So it's more likely that there's something up with the mix, that there's too much water in that mix. So Lisa, if you're still watching, the beginner bread recipe is a low hydration loaf. It's 2 loaves, 120 grams of starter, 680 grams of water, 1,000 grams of flour, and 20 grams of salt. And then the level 2 hydration is 200 grams of starter, 700 grams of water, and then 1,000 grams of flour and 20 grams of salt. So not a huge difference in the water, right? We only go from 680 grams to 700 grams. So if you're doing, say, for example, 750 grams and, 100 to 200 grams of starter and at about 1,000 grams of flour, right? That's a 75% hydration. I do find that all-purpose flour struggles to hold much more hydration than 70%. So depending on what flour you're using, you know, there's lots of things going in there. But your dough definitely should not be too sticky to shape. Pre-shaping does help manage stickiness, but if it's like really sticky, it won't pre-shape either. Like I did a live the other day where I had left on purpose dough out overnight. It had like quadrupled in size. It was huge. And while I was able to pre-shape it, but it just kept bursting open, right? Like it wouldn't, when we pre-shape our dough, we kind of build, like we trap all of the air inside of the dough and we build like a skin on top of the dough. And it, yeah, I'll try that. And it wouldn't hold it. Let's see what Ricky's saying here. Okay, hang on a second. Copy invitation link. Okay, I'll be right back, guys. I know you can still hear me, but my face might look frozen, but it's not. Let's see if this works. Okay, so here we go. Cancel. Skip to next. Good. Okay. You should have it, Rick. I sent it to you. Amanda Lynn, thank you for your videos and your help. I've watched and followed your videos and beginner recipe and had wonderful results. Love your simplicity and your calm approach. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that, Amanda. That's very sweet of you to say. I love it. It's fun. And I just want it to be super easy for everybody. There you are. Okay.
I can see our attendees and everything now.
Yeah, so if someone uses less than 20 grams of salt, I suspect that could also have the same effect as too much water. Yeah, if they forget to put their salt in, that definitely could be an issue. But it sounds like Lisa's having the same problem every time. So I'm not sure. If you're still here, Lisa, tell us what's happening.
Deep thoughts about the hydration of starter, and we've had the discussion a lot.
Yeah, we do. And I always end up, so Rick's an admin in the big sourdough group. He's also my husband. We love cooking. We fell into sourdough just on our cooking adventures, but we do a lot of it like where we figure it out, like how are we going to do this together? And so he has learned so much sourdough science. And by the way, I know this is a generalization and I shouldn't do it, but I do find that the men in the group tend to be more scientific, like more focused on what the science is. So Rick's done I'm going to get him to tell you about it, but a whole bunch of research on the hydration of a starter. And I'm always like, that's great, but it's way too much for a beginner. But since we're sitting here, explain it.
Well, my thought is that we don't know how wet someone's starter actually is. So
right.
Sometimes I see starter mixes that are like thick. Okay. So what, and we're not, in most recipes, nobody's calculating them as part of the hydration. Okay.
So wait, let me stop you there. So some recipes actually do, that's a levain. So when you see a recipe that says prepare the levain, those recipes are actually controlling the hydration of the starter. What you do with your levain is pull a little bit out of your starter and make it at the way they tell you to. So anyways, keep going.
Right. Yeah, but most of the stuff like that you see in the group or like on a TikTok or something has zero talk about that. Yeah. So if somebody perhaps had a sopping wet starter, there could be an effect, is all I'm saying. And then that starter's less active, right? And depending on where they live, so say you got one person doing the same thing in Colorado and another person doing it in South Florida, it's a massive difference in the amount of hydration in that loaf, is my thought. Like,
agreed. I totally agree. And so Hildy and I talked a lot about how she should have a low hydration starter because that'll make it have less sour taste, right? So Hildy's going to have a fairly thick starter in order to she's trying to keep that starter from going into the alcohol phase, right? So starter is just exactly like any other fermented food, right? So when you ferment potatoes long enough, you get vodka, right? That's what happens. And so with your starter, that would happen if you didn't feed it. And what we're doing by feeding our starter more flour is keeping it in this suspended state of partially fermented.
But that's not what I mean. What I mean is, here's the perfect example. Someone takes their starter out of the fridge, okay? And they go to feed it, okay? But they're not accurate. They're not measuring properly, whatever the case may be, okay? So they douse this thing with water, because a lot of these people too, there's this new movement where they're like, we don't have to follow the rules, and you know
Yes.
what I mean? We're just going to mix by eye. And some of them look like waffle batter at
Yeah.
the starter looks like waffle batter at the Holiday Inn. So
Yeah.
that's a super wet starter is my thought. It
Yeah,
might.
so the other thing is too, the starters get super wet when they've sat and fermented a long time, right? Like if you leave the starter sitting in your fridge for 2 weeks or on the counter for 2 days and don't feed it, it's going to alcohol, right? It's getting wetter and wetter. So another thing, people start out in sourdough like trying to just follow the rules, right? But over time, as you get more comfortable, there's circumstances where you can look at your starter and say, oh, that's getting a little watery. I'm going to just give it a little more flour than water this time. So it's entirely common for me to feed my starter 75 grams of flour and only 50 grams of water to try and get that thickness, right? So that would mean that I'm working with sort of a low hydration um, starter mix then, right? My starter would be much thicker. Theoretically, it should make the bread act differently, right? And this is what Rick and I always end up talking about. The problem is that it's impossible to quantify, right? So
Well, this is
when
what I'm saying. If I run to the fridge right now, rip a starter out, and I'm like, I've got to feed this thing, and I'm going to make a loaf later. So I throw some water in it, whatever the case may be, a little flour, and I'm gone, right? And I come back, whatever my rise is, I'm not paying attention. There's a lot of factors at play, right?
yeah,
Especially when the people in the group are looking at pictures of finished breads that are like
yeah.
not even real. Sometimes they're so nice, right? So
Yeah, we have to delete a few people from the group every day who just like go and get a picture of somebody else's loaf out of another group and then post it and go, "It's my first loaf." Like, and
first
then like
day, just
20,000
gave this a
people.
try. And then
Yeah, and
I
then
love when they're like, and I didn't follow any of the rules. So this starter, I didn't feed it for 6 weeks. I just found it in the back of the cupboard. And I don't have to follow the rules. So you just throw this together and they show a picture of everybody else's stuff and it's a disaster for everyone.
I know, and then people come in and comment and they're morose. They're so upset. They're like, I'm gonna quit. Like I've tried 10 loaves and none of them ever look like this, and you got this on your first try. And I'm like,
Yeah.
please don't quit. And I'm not saying don't hate. You gotta appreciate some people do get it right. Like
My
I
favorite is when it has 9,700 likes and all the comments are, send that recipe, please. Like, can't
yeah.
wait. And I'm like, we can't fix all this.
Well, so okay, but wait a sec. We gotta appreciate. So I went to my girlfriend Crystal's house. There's a video on YouTube. It's called Episode One, Sarah's Sourdough Home Visits. This is what I'm gonna do. And I think that with good instruction, like good specific, like able to talk to you, someone there with you one on one, can make it so that you can make sourdough perfectly on your first try. I've been bugging Rick to let me film him. I really want you to do it and be episode 2. You just got to do it, right? But anyhow, Crystal's first loaf was perfect. And the way it worked out with Crystal in this episode, if you haven't seen it, you can watch it on YouTube. Um, I went to Crystal's house and all I brought was my starter. I said, as long as you have flour, I don't care what kind, like you just have to have flour. I got there and we just went through her cupboards and she did have a Dutch oven, but she didn't have, other stuff that we would use, right? But anyhow, we got the loaf done. And what I had done was early that morning, I had mixed my own dough and had it in the earlier bulk proofing phase so that I didn't have to stay at Crystal's all day because we both have kids, right? We both have to get our kids after school. So we mixed hers, got it bulk proofing, baked mine, right? And then showed the end loaf. And then the next day, she baked her own by herself and it was perfect. So some people, especially if they are lucky enough, can get that good loaf at first. But in most cases, it's just crying and fails and
No, that's not the
frustration.
same. That's not the same. That having you there is not the same as ripping your first loaf by yourself.
I'm just checking at the YouTube comments here. That's
We could
neat.
bring in another co-host too. Let's get Hildy up in here and we'll just all sit on here.
Yeah, I've been trying to get Tom from the Sourdough Journey to do it with me, but he's so busy. And then I noticed today, Tom from the Sourdough Journey watched the eclipse. He has a telescope and he got a special sun filter for his telescope. And so I can't wait to talk to him next and show him that I also am a telescope geek. I love that stuff so much. And
Let's
I was
go.
like,
Listen, go in and look at those nice loaves. Let's see those.
oh, yeah, okay, I'll show you guys these. They're really beautiful. I'm so proud of them. My kitchen is a mess. We just barely got supper done in time before I had to go live, so I'm a little embarrassed, but let's see. I haven't even got them closed yet. So, oops, hang on a second here. Hang on. All right, so this is the one we ate for supper. Lighting's terrible in here. But look at that crumb. Oh my gosh, it's so beautiful.
It's
So
like
much. And
probably a
like,
6.
oh, I'm not going to be friends with you if you're going to rate my bread. You know, I'll show you this other one. Rick created this rating thing for loaves. Like people are like, can rate my crumb. And he actually created like between 6 and 8 means this, and that, right? So anyways, I'll show you this other one. It's quite pretty. I haven't
Nobody's ever
cut
been
it.
over a 6. Like I've never. Ooh,
Look at that
look at
perfect
that
ear.
ear too.
Yeah, perfect ear. Lots of good stuff. We put a little bit of we just sprinkled some garlic
Huge
and
spring too. That one really had a lot. That's
yeah,
a
it's
big one.
sprung. And then also like I can squish it and it'll pop back. Like it's just full of air, but it's also dripping stuff everywhere. So Hildy's got a question. Let's play that. Hang on one second here. Hildy says, I'm here. Yeah, Rick was talking about making you come and be on the screen with us like that. That's funny. Lisa, that's another thing we could have done was we could have had Lisa come on and just show us her pictures that way. But don't worry, we'll definitely get that figured out. Let's see what's happening here now. Skip to next. Okay, good. Yeah, those loaves I'm happy with. And they tasted delicious. They're sitting here on the table in front of me, and it's taking everything I have to not grab it and eat it. Like, but I can't talk with my mouth full. Just won't do it. So good. Good. All right. Well, if we don't have that many questions left, Rick, unless you want to say something and do it, then I think we can start to get wrapped up here. If anybody else has any questions, get them in now. We'll finish in about 5 minutes or so. And yeah, we'll go from there.
I think inclusion loaves are for people that just want to show off.
The only time I've ever made them, it's been for somebody else.
See?
You know what I mean? Like, well, I made them too because I wanted to make the tutorial videos, right? But so whenever I want to make a tutorial video, I find somebody. So like our friend Tyler, like eats garlic, like cloves of garlic raw. Like it just shocks me, right? So I made him a cheesy garlic loaf and I put so much fresh garlic in. Like it was making my eyes water when I was doing it and my hands stunk like garlic. And then afterwards he was like, Sarah, that was so good. He was like, but the garlic was like he's showing me his twitchy eye. And then I did
You
the
know what
same
I
thing.
bet? I bet a good one would be onion. Like
Yeah,
inside, like sliced onion.
Yeah, didn't I think there used to always be onion bread at the grocery store.
There
Onion
was.
buns, like for
Yeah,
burgers and stuff.
right.
Yeah, that would be good. I loved that chocolate one I made, remember? Oh, so good. You didn't love it as much, but Lexi and I were eating it like dessert. Right? So this chocolate sourdough that I have, oh my gosh, it's so sticky and messy, you can't even shape it. But if you trust the process and just go through the recipe, it's delicious. And it's like not quite bread, not quite cake, both. And it's got this nice like you could slather butter on it. It's almost like banana bread, but I don't even know
Didn't
how
we
to
do a
explain it.
banana bread too, though?
Yeah, we did blueberry banana bread. That's the recipe. That recipe is in the ultimate guide to sourdough discard recipes.
Right. Yeah.
So you had to do a lot of tasting while I was prepping for that recipe book. Where can I get a perfect looking plastic loaf so I can claim I made it on my first try? Yeah, I know.
That's what people do. I swear to
All
God,
you gotta
there's
do on the
awful
right,
people in the group, and they're
just
just trolls. Like they just want people to like. They'll be in there answering comments and stuff, and you're like, "No, you didn't." Like,
They usually get reported. So people message me all the time. Every morning I wake up to 5 or 6 messages and they're just like, "Hey Sarah, like I saw this happening last
oh
night."
yeah,
And
everybody in here. By the way, everyone in the group's a rat. Like, if you guys post anything mean, we get it reported. I have to. Every morning, it's like I have to take care of all the kids in the group. There's like 1,000 people that were mean to somebody else at night, or, and it's like
yeah.
not that they were mean. It's like that everybody just tattles the whole day away.
Well, it's good though, because we want the group to stay, kind. And that's my philosophy is that it's supposed to be for everybody. But it's funny too, because when we get a new mod at first, they're always reluctant to ban somebody. And I just say to them, look, there's 750,000 members in the group. If this one person is on your radar, I think we know what the issue is. So, but in most cases, most people are really friendly and do their best and they share and help each other, right? So it works out pretty
Bi- I
good.
think Bill is the best in the group, though. Like, I honestly like the stuff that he's doing, and that's in Ontario, eh? That's why I like it so much. It's in Penetang.
Oh, is that where he is? Penetang? I
Yeah,
thought I thought it said Sudbury or something.
yeah, he's not
So
far.
I'm gonna have to send him this clip. So Bill, is it Birdage or Burbage?
I'd have to relook. I've spoken to him in comments before, and I'm like, Bud, every time you do one of these posts, I'm just like,
In all, it's so
yeah.
beautiful. So okay, so his name's Bill Burdage or Burbage. I think it's Burdidge, and he's a group member in the Sourdough for Beginners Facebook group. So that's not the tutorials page, that's the big group. There's 755,000 members in there. And Bill's been there for quite some time. And like I said, I think he owns a
But at
bakery.
least he's reasonable too. He'll post his first loaf and be like, "This is what it looked like," and now it's like
Yeah.
he's just next leveled everyone.
He's so good. He's only been doing it for about a year, but and his posts are also helpful, right? Like I'm the sourdough teacher, and yet I read his post and thought, you know what, I should really just try it the way he's doing it to see if this works well for me. And sure enough, right? So the only change I made to my process, I kept my same recipe. I kept the same essential processes. I just stopped putting a towel on my bowl while I was mixing and got it into the clear straight sided containers as soon as it was mixed, because that was one thing he specifically said. And another thing he said is that when he scores, he makes sure his score lines never intersect each other, and that's what keeps them from blowing out. Like I tried to do like a score that I saw on a short one time the other day, and it kind of blew out, right? So not only is he making amazing, beautiful looking bread, but his scores are insane and he's really good. So we should get a clip of this and send it to Bill. Maybe we can get him to come on and host with us. That would be cool. All right. Okay. Well, I think we're good, guys. Thanks so much for being here. And we'll end it for tonight and see you all next week.
I'll see
Maybe I'll
you
just,
in 1 minute.
I know I'll see you in 1 minute too, but
I'll
how do
see
I,
you while I'm eating Oreo ice cream sandwiches.
All right.
Okay, let's get started. So first things first, I start by measuring 120 grams of active starter into my bowl. Next, I tare my scale to 0 and I add 680 grams of water. I'm using regular tap water. I use the whisk to mix my water and my starter, and I stir until my starter is fully dissolved. Next, I tare my scale back to 0 and I add 850 grams of all-purpose or regular bread flour. Next, I add 150 grams of a sturdier flour, either